Welcome to the Construction Brothers Podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Campbell, and with me, like he is every week, my brother, Eddie Campbell.
What's up, Tyler?
Not much, Eddie. Well, this week, a civil engineer speaks. All right, Mr. Civil Engineer, how's it going? Why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us who you are and what you do.
Tyler, I'm doing great. My name's Racz, and I am a civil professional engineer in the state of Oregon and Massachusetts.
Very nice. Dude, so, all right, weather's nice and nasty down here. Is it freaking cold up in your neck of the woods right now? It's cold down here.
Portland, is known for the rain and the grime and being cold. But in the summer times, we get crazy amounts of sun, so we're almost there. We're almost there.
Almost there. Well, all right. So tell us about your kind of history as an engineer. Like, when did you start? How long you been doing this? And then I want to get into some of what we were talking about a minute ago for the audience, because I think it'll be interesting. But start us off with like how long you've been an engineer and kind of your experience.
Yeah. So I've been working the engineering industry for 7-ish years, 7.5 years. So when I say engineering, it's a huge, broad stroke of things that I could do, but I'm in the building industry. So particularly I work with structural engineers, and I do structural design of buildings, bridges, you name it, everything in between. And originally I got a little bit of a flavor on both coasts. I started off on the East Coast in the Northeast, where I went to school there, undergrad, all that kind of stuff, started my professional career out there, and then headed over to the West Coast, where I'm at now, and doing more design over here with some different materials and, designing for earthquakes, all that kind of cool stuff.
We have some experience in seismic zones, and it's a heck of a lot of fun.
It is interesting. Now, what's the difference between a civil engineer and a structural engineer?
Yeah, that's a great point to talk about. In the engineering industries, particularly for structural engineering, I can't technically, although I work on structures, I cannot label myself as a structural engineer, although I am what's called a professional engineer, a professional civil engineer. That is what I'm licensed in. And then civil engineering, one of the subsets is structural engineering. So you might say, well, if you're a civil engineer, doesn't that by default mean you're a structural engineer? Well, no, there's additional requirements and tests that you have to take in order to get a standalone license that makes sure that you are a specific structural engineer, an SE. So I'm the PE working on towards that SE.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, and that was something that we were completely oblivious to. Obviously, we reset the episode because originally we were going to call it a structural engineer speaks, and then you're like, but. And so I'm glad you clarified for us, and it's hilarious because we work with structural engineers all the time. You would think that we would know something like that.
Yeah, and a big thing with that for anyone in the audience who's a little hazy on it is you can get a professional engineer to work on your house or work on some smaller buildings, and that's completely fine. That's legal, and that's perfect. But there is a cutoff point when the types of structures that you work on where they need to call in the structural engineers to do the stamping of the documents, not just a regular professional engineer. Things like hospitals, huge bridges and skyscrapers, things of a larger magnitude where the risk to human life is greater. There's that next step in licensing.
So what kind of materials are you working with day to day? Because I immediately, when I think structural, I go to steel, but it's not all that's involved there. What sorts of materials are you working with on a day to day basis?
Yeah, steel's a huge one. There's steel, concrete's a big one, wood, and then masonry, kind of that block CMU construction. Those four are really the heavy hitters in my industry.
Got it. Now, we are doing this Civil Engineer Speaks, or this Speaks series, so that we get a feedback loop and so that we know how the other half thinks. And so from the standpoint of being an engineer, what are some of the pain points and things that are irritants for you?
One thing from a design standpoint, so the two major phases for the engineer when designing a building is kind of the design phase, when you're working with the client more so, and the architect and the design team to get that package together and design the frickin' thing. And then the next phase, the CA phase, or the construction administration phase, when you become, hand in hand with your contractor and you build the thing, or they build the thing with your supervision and everyone's a happy family. Those two phases, there's different challenges as both. I would say in the design phase, one thing is just, and it's commonly a joke, is trying to pull from the client what their vision in their head is and put it on paper and make it a reality. And just to squeeze out of them, they may think they know exactly what they want, but when they start going through the process and there's every decision under the sun that they have to make, you can go back and forth a lot, and a lot of things can change if you don't help them along on their journey to know what they want, if that makes sense.
Yeah. When you say client, like who are you specifically referring to though? Like, I mean, architect or an owner, or I guess it could be a little bit of a variation there, but who traditionally are you helping?
Yeah, traditionally it is the architect is the client that hires the structural engineering side of it onto the team. So we funnel through them, and they're kind of the earpiece for the owner. But there's plenty of projects where it's also the engineer discusses directly with the owner as well. So primarily the architect and the owner.
So, I mean, when you're talking about making sure that the client is like you're helping the client achieve their vision from an architecture standpoint, if they've got massive spanning beams or something like that in this open atrium, I would imagine there would be some conversations that would need to happen around that to make sure stuff doesn't fall on their head. So, I mean, is that the sort of stuff that you're talking about? Like, do you have any examples of like that collaboration and how it's been good or bad for you?
Yeah, a big one is spanning further with a thinner profile. It seems more often the common thing that architects are after, and through no fault of their own. It's just kind of a look that they're going for, and that is where the engineer needs to work, overtime to push that limit to make it a reality. You can span really far distances with really deep truss girders and all this kind of stuff, but they may not want that look. They want it to be sleek and slender, and so that's where the engineer needs to get pushed to make it a reality. So that's that one area as an example of a combat point of, well, how thin can we make this roof profile and how far can it go?
I'm thinking in seismic country, just trying to figure out whether you're going to go with a moment frame for your seismic resistance system or whether you're going for the brace frame look, and how intrusive that gets into the architecture or the workable space. One thing I've noticed in the West Coast is like you see braces in buildings like right out in windows everywhere. And that's got to come into play being in Portland.
Oh, yeah. Yep. So laying out your lateral system, that's the process that you're talking about. Choosing the lateral system, whether it's, like you said, moment frames, brace frames, shear walls, and then working hand in hand with the architect to, okay, here's our floor plan. It's perfect. Can't change it. And it's like, well, you need a brace right there, over there, right here. We can work with you to move these around and shuffle the cards a little bit, but every single project, you go through that dance. And yes, actually, that's a funny one because talking about aesthetic a little bit, me just being the engineer over here, I love that look of the exposed braces. And there's some people that they have that, they love it. And there's plenty of others who say, we got to hide all of that stuff. I never want to see that again. Structural steel, get it out of here. Let's fur it out and make sure it disappears and looks seamless.
That's my favorite word. Well, fur it out. That's my favorite thing that I hear.
I've heard in cities like San Francisco that people actually take some solace in seeing the braces up in the windows.
Really?
And maybe that's just a structural engineer story that they tell the architects to get them to buy off on a brace frame because they want to use it. But
makes people
I've heard
comfortable.
it, so it must be true. Well, what else do you have? What other kind of pain points are there? So you've mentioned the design phase. What about the CA phase of the job?
Yeah, construction is a big one that I wanted to get into
Yeah.
because that's a lot of our audience here is like just a lot of contractors. So like what sort of feedback would you have for contractors specifically on this?
Sure. So got a little list brewing here. It's not bad things. It's just, I think,
Bring it.
great talking points that
We're ready.
I want to hear both sides. I want to hear those details from the contracting side to be like, oh, this is why certain things are done this way or not for my own knowledge. And that may segue into my first question of engineers love to hear contractors asking questions when the building is being built, and not just about they are pros in building. But if they're asking questions as to why did the engineer do this way? Why is this detail like that? Why are you having me do this? I haven't seen that before. When we hear that the contractor's asking those types of questions and just wants to know more from the engineering side, we know most of the time that that's from a good place of curiosity. And it's like, hey, I want to get better at what I do. And if I have a little more insight and understanding of why you're doing what you're doing, I can remember that for next time and sync up with the engineer even better and anticipate those changes or those details that are forthcoming. And we really do like that. We like to hear that they're thinking more than just getting it built, but why.
This is a good one. I think that's coming from a place of you guys being good engineers. You want that feedback. You want to hear it. So often, though, the experience that I have felt, and I know Eddie has felt, is that when you ask those questions, there's a lot of pushback on the engineering side too. So it's really interesting that you say that because, and we've had experiences with engineers where they are very receptive to that sort of like talking through the issues, but there are a lot of people out there that are very resistant to it, and they don't want to hear any questions at all.
Interesting.
You have experience more with this than I do, but like,
yeah, there's a resistance and a almost like a condescending tone that can be formed when you ask a question. Like, there are no stupid questions, there are only stupid people, and you happen to be one of them, and you're asking the question now. That can come out. So this has to vary from engineer to engineer, because I know I have encountered some that do not want to be asked anything. That can't figure out why you can't figure it out.
Well, I'm sure you've experienced that though, Rich. Like even like encountering some architects or even other engineers that are just very resistant to actually answering any questions. And I think we kind of talked about that last time we were on the phone, is that resistance to answer questions.
Yeah, you bring up some good points. And I think, unfortunately, I think we can all agree in every profession, there's bad people in that profession. That doesn't mean the profession itself is bad. You know, there's crappy librarians out there. Doesn't mean librarians are bad people. Like, and that's and
I don't know, man. I don't know. Parks and Rec told me that all librarians are bad.
But the other point is your tone, like you said, is the way that you deliver and you ask the questions and other people and how they pick them up and receive them. If it's in a condescending manner, yeah, I mean, there's no room in a professional environment for stuff like that. It's like, come on, we're all trying to learn. We all don't know everything. There's so many worse things in the world. If everyone just sits there and nods their head in a big board meeting, it's like, yeah, I get everything going on. And if someone asks a question, is like, can you explain that to me? Like, I'm sorry. Like, I don't know if it's just me, but I don't get what's going on. And then all of a sudden everyone's like, oh crap. Yeah, I have no idea either. And then it's like, if you're just going along blindly to be like, I don't want to look stupid, it's like, it's just a terrible way to go about it, because people can feed off of that and just be like, yeah, I'm just going to go with it.
That's a really important point, is coming to people with, we kind of refer to it hat in hand, like coming to them and saying, listen, I think I'm an idiot here, kind of throwing it on yourself, being like, I'm stupid, help me, and being able to come to people like that, it definitely kind of diffuses the situation. But there's one side of it too, is like in a boardroom, I'm going to say, or a job trailer, sometimes those environments are more combustible than just getting a person like one-on-one. I don't know if that's just me, but it feels like those situations can be more combustible because they're almost worried about being called out for something. They're worried that they could come off as an idiot or something. And so they get defensive in a room of people.
That's true. I will agree that there's a time and a place for sure. If the owners or the design team is on the job site today and it's a big meeting and everyone's there, maybe not the best time to be like, hey boss, how do you screw this, this screw into this 2x? It's like different. Let's talk after the big meeting, but one last thing to talk on that point is the total flip opposite, is engineers talking with the contractor on site. and the trades on site to be like, hey, how are you putting that together? I only design it when it's in its finished state, but how it gets to that point, I don't know. A lot of engineers don't know. That comes with years and years of experience to start to realize how it gets built. And you're working with a good contractor as well when they're open to be like, yeah, hey, by the way, did you know that you got us doing lag screws or, lag bolts on that connection over there? We got to drill pilot holes and then we got to drill them out and it's subject to split. And you have us doing that, 60 feet of length. So that equals, 1,000 screws. Like on this other job, we've used this type of screw that doesn't involve all that work. Did you ever think about that? It's like, if that's delivered in the right way to the engineer, it's like, oh, that is amazing feedback. I just had no idea. I didn't know that was the process to get to that point. Sure, I would love to look into and do the research on that and improve my design for the benefit of the design or for the entire construction team for the future. Being able to ask how things are built on site as the engineer to the contractor is another super big one that, sure, there's going to be plenty of times when they're like, you don't know how this thing gets put together. You designed it. You're the big fancy engineer. And it's like, to be humble enough on the engineering side to say, you're right, I don't know. Spend 10 minutes with me. Show me. I'd love to see it. Like, I hope people do more of that because it's important.
That's good stuff. I'm sure there are follow-ups, but I want to get to the next thing kind of you got on your list. So, so what else do you have?
Yeah, for sure. When there are problems in the field or unforeseen, conditions, reaching out to the engineer and stating what the problem is, and then also including a proposed solution that you would like it done for us to review is something that we love. There are times when I get it, when it's like, I have no idea how we're going to go about this. Please help. Totally get that. But if there's times when you're like, oh, I'm pretty sure I know how to get around this, but I need you to verify, that is so much better than just saying, here's my problem, fix it. That's a big one.
Yep. Well, coming to you with a suggestion that has some experience baked in, and I like trying to offer an RFI that not only has a suggestion, but postures it in a yes/no situation, because that can make your life very easy. Is this acceptable? Yes. That's an easy response to have, or if not, then let me know why or how we need to revise it. But I like trying to make your life easy as I'm sending RFI back up the chain. So how's that received? You're coming at it with a solution, but you're also coming at it with a bit of a attitude. I'm trying to even make your answer short.
Beautiful. I'd work with you anytime. That's awesome. That's
all
awesome.
Right, we'll get together after the call. That's good.
In addition to that, stuff like, we all do this. We're all totally enveloped in the thing that we're doing. So we understand it 10 times over. And then when you have to express something to somebody else and explain it, you kind of like, well, in your head, you're like, I know all about it. So you instantly, for some reason, think that they know all about it. So you're describing it in a manner with which you think they already have all this background information and they don't. To take an extra 5-10 minutes when describing the location, where to find it on plan, pictures, if you can take the time to take the pictures of the situation, clear pictures, documenting all of that and compiling all that information is another big one.
How do you feel about model snapshots and things of that nature to try to convey? This is picture's worth 1,000 words. I guess I'm trying to line you up for a yes answer, but I mean, if I give you something that demonstrates it in a picture, this is much easier than me giving you a paragraph of text. Correct?
Correct. Yes.
Beautiful.
So often, we get paragraphs and paragraphs and paragraphs, and that never goes well.
No,
ever. No, like I don't know about y'all, but like I have a hard time reading an entire paragraph of an email. Like I really do.
We recently kicked a project off where we had 21 RFI to start the project off, each of which were large run-on sentence type RFI when they first got submitted.
With section mark detail and all that stuff called out.
Correct. Yeah. And I mean, let me tell you, it was death getting it back. I can only imagine what it would be like on the engineer's end to receive that and go, oh my gosh, no. Because that's a word problem for everyone. Nobody likes word problems at school. That's a word problem for you. Here's 21 of them. Go do your homework. Awful. All right. Well, let's keep going. What else?
What else
do we
you
have?
got?
So kind of talking on the RFI front, now let's shift gears over to submittals. A big one that we start to see more and more is, some people call it rubber stamping, or just the contractor not doing due diligence during submittal phase, saying, yep, looks good. And then when the engineer and the design team go through in their review and they thoroughly review it and find errors and send it back to say, hey, you got to resubmit because there's a lot of stuff incorrect or unclear. The contractor getting upset about that, that's one that's kind of a grinds our gears kind of a thing.
So the dreaded revise and resubmit, that makes everybody angry.
Yes.
Yeah, the person who submitted it, the person who had to throughput it and process it, and I'm sure the person that reviewed it. They all hate it.
No, I thought everybody like in the design end loved revise and resubmit. Like I don't understand. I thought you guys loved that stuff.
No way. I can't speak to the other designers out there, but from the engineering side, we really do try to do our best to revise with, marks and clarifications. That way submitted with clarifications. That revise and resubmit, we do understand it's a whole process to go through. Again, a lot of time, a lot of energy, and a lot of paperwork to go through that. But I guess more so the main point is, if there is big steel shops, we all know steel shops, real, lengthy documents, and sometimes contractor comes through and says, yep, we reviewed it, approved. And then we do our review and we look through 200 pages and there's not a single comment on there. To us, we're like, come on, team. Did you really review? Because there's a lot of feedback that and knowledge they have that should go into that document to make sure we're bulletproof that we don't know.
I'm going to say in the high 90 percentile, jobs go through approval without GC marks.
Yeah,
that we submit.
Occasionally you get one,
but
occasionally.
Usually there is very little in the way of general contractor marks. Every once in a while you get one that's really paying attention, and he'll boomerang it on you.
Wait. Are you looking for RTU information? All right,
you got me.
We never have that ever, and everybody's always looking for it.
Yes, that revise and resubmit thing is very frustrating for all involved. So let me speak from the bottom end, the person who submits that stuff. Many times we're being asked to just cloud it and move, right? So just cloud it on the drawings and push it on through. We got to get this thing into approval because we need to hit that node on the schedule. What is your disposition towards like a clouded shop drawing, right? So I've got dimensional questions. I have a question on a detail that might not have worked for me. I've got a question on something that's, outstanding from an RFI that may be in the midst of a process, but the fabricator wanted to turn it in. The GC was forcing our hand, and it comes to your desk and you've got a set of shop drawings that has clouds all over it asking for information. How does that compare to like, just waiting the RFI process out so that there are no clouds on a drawing?
So I actually like to see that. If there's already gone through that type of process, it takes that larger submittal package and breaks it into like, okay, we have specific questions here or things that don't jive here with the design documents. That allows us to focus and answer those hot items within that submittal package instead of just broadly saying, here it is, try to find problems. We can put our time and effort to solving real problems for you that are hot. So we love to see when things are clouded and someone has taken that additional pass through to say, hey, I don't think this is quite coordinated, or this isn't quite lining up, this dimension doesn't really make that situation work. That I love to see that. I do.
It's maddening. So when the general contractor reviews it, it goes through the engineer, the cloud gets looked at, and the engineer's like, well, that's a dimensional coordination issue. That's not me. And then it goes to the architect. It's like, hey, architect, maybe question mark or something like this. The architect's like, no, this is a constructability and coordination thing. This isn't me. GC to coordinate. And then it goes back down to the GC, and the GC doesn't even look at it again. And it comes back to you, and you went all the way through a 4-week process, and nobody did anything for you. And you're like, all right, back to the RFI again.
It's my favorite thing. It's the Spider-Man guys all pointing
Everybody
at
pointing at each other. That's it.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it does happen. I'm not going to sit here and say that. What are you talking about? Everyone always takes responsibility for what they're supposed to, but it unfortunately happens, and it's something that should be reduced. But when it's not I guess I'll say when it's not a team sitting together, when it's the GC and the subs and the architect and the engineer all sitting in one room with the submittal and being like, that ain't me, everyone points to it. No. And it's like, well, somebody, it's gotta be. You have that digital screen nowadays where, I know that that's not how it was done, but you get to review it independently and then move on to the next person. So I think there's a little bit of that kick in the can that can happen where it's like, well, and I don't know if this is, me, but maybe someone else will pick it up, because I'm not sure type of thing, I'm not saying don't do that, but I'm saying I think that's how it can happen. It can lead to that full circle.
I think ultimately, in a lot of ways, it's on everybody to take the time to ask the question even further. Like, just take that extra time to clarify, maybe pull the parties to the table and help coordinate. Like, be part of the solution. Don't be part of the problem, which is just saying, like, see ARC. Or, all right, engineer, here you go, with a question mark. Like, ARC with a question mark is like the best comment ever. It's my favorite thing. I love it. It's so productive.
If you're producing shop drawings, having an understanding of who that question is actually being directed at.
That too, yeah.
And then saying something specific about it so that everybody knows who is the responsible party for the coordination. That can help too, rather than leaving something in obscurity for everybody to guess at and figure out for themselves. So, everybody's got a hand in it, and good communication takes work.
Heck yeah. All right, man. What else you got? You got anything else?
Yeah, let's see here. This is one that's interesting. I want your feedback. Prioritizing RFIs and issues on site. When it can start off great and, here's a little priority list, and then we're 3 weeks into construction on maybe it's going to be a 12-month construction period or whatever. And all of a sudden everything is nuclear hot, the hottest hot it can possibly be. And it's every single one of them. And so by stating that everything is critically important, now nothing is critically important. And we can't provide our services where you actually need it to hit your schedule. Defining what is important and what is not, having that template, and then sticking wholeheartedly to it. I get that everything is really important, but do you get what I mean? Once it starts going down and falling apart and it's just everything's critical, then we can't help you. We can't be as effective as helping you.
Yeah, where do we start? Everything's hot. Yeah.
I'll just echo that, because I would like to have a true understanding of what a project schedule is. Like, what is critical, truly critical, because then I can answer that bell. Help me to understand whether, I'm jumping through my hind parts for a reason or not. Because it seems like the whole world's going to burn down when you look at the email list a lot of times. Everything's like hot. I had a hot counter on my desk to count how many times I got an email that said hot on it, right? And like within a month, it's like 15 to 20 hot email. That's probably low in a lot of people's world. So, just false urgency can be a bad thing. Though I do think it's, incumbent on the person asking the question to try to give some priority or have some understanding of how a project works, how a project's awarded. We mentioned RTU frames. Mm-hmm. Just understanding that a general contractor may not have gotten to the point in time where they've bought and awarded that contract yet, and they don't have the necessary information to be able to provide it for you yet. Stressing the importance of it, but knowing you're not going to get it quite yet is a deal, because now I know I'm going to have to work around this. I'm going to have to continue to move. I don't have much of an answer. I have more of a, me too, in that. I think that happens to a lot of people. in the industry.
Now, does that come from the subs coming to your desk and saying, like, echoing that, plumbing comes in, this is super critical to my path of work and I'm going to be delayed. And in reality, they could have, having that understanding as the GC to say, hey, you can go work on another part of the building. I know you can. It's not as critical as you think it is. We're trying to pour this deck. That's critical or whatever. Does it just continue down that chain of command where it goes from the GC, it goes to the subs, and everyone's knocking on your door saying, this is life and death? So then that message just gets relayed, or?
Yeah, I think that, well, if the initial message had some sense of urgency to it, that can go almost into a megaphone, and that urgency, it gets amplified as it comes down the chain. When something comes from your customer and you're trying to be good for them, a lot of times you want to answer fast. And so whether it was important to them or not, you want to get something turned quickly. So if coordination's coming back down to us, hey, I need your model so that the deck guy can coordinate with you. I need your model so that the HVAC guy can coordinate with you. Whatever it is, I need it now. I need that now. It's urgent. And then many times when we get something, it's in the field. Anything that's in the field in the hands of a erector is urgent. Mm-hmm. In anything, everything. There is no working around it. I need it now. So, explaining the actual urgency of a task. Here's what we're deciding to do. It's usually, it's stopped the whole shop is how, this is sitting on the benches. It's stopped the whole line. Nobody can work anymore. We had to send them all home. The crane's sitting out there and we're paying $1,500 an hour for the crane, and the operator's gone to Tahiti because we only had him to the end of the day. So he's going to charge us for the next 3 months. Some of the stuff gets really kind of silly, but and obviously that's a little bit of hyperbole, a little bit. I might be playing that up just a touch, but it really does feel that way.
Crane operators don't go to Tahiti. They go to the Bahamas. We all know that.
Exactly.
Fair enough.
It's so funny you brought up the crane, because I was just about to say that as an example of, I know one of the earlier things that I've learned is if a crane's on site, it is hot. Don't try to think that it's not, because exactly that example.
Yeah, that guy's getting paid by the hour and time's a wasting.
Well, yeah, those bigger cranes are so stinking expensive.
Oh, you get like a 300-ton crane out there,
yeah,
and it's supposed to be there for a day and a half, and something happens. Yeah, people start getting their feelings hurt.
Yeah.
And yeah, you're going to get a real fire, not just hot, but a real fire lit under your butt. So
I think a lot of it comes down to honesty, though, guys. Like, I think that's a big part of it, is being honest with how hot it truly is. Kind of boiling off the fat here, right? So if you're a contractor or you're a sub or any of these, just be honest with where you're at and honest with what you truly need. And if you don't quite know and everything feels hot, maybe you ought to take a second to think through some stuff. Because I guarantee you that if you sit down for a second, you'll start to go through and figure out what's hot and what's not.
A lot of times this comes out of a lack of planning many times. That I think is the irritation I get is you've been sitting on the info for 3 weeks, and now all of the sudden there was no foresight of the fact that Christmas was coming. I should have saved my money.
I was going to use that same analogy because it's so true. I can't believe Christmas is here. It happens at the same time every year. What in the world?
Gosh, what happened?
It's like the RTU frames. It's like, oh my gosh, we don't have.
We're teching tomorrow.
It's like, well, okay, but we know this. Every single project, this is gonna be a flipping issue every single time.
Yep.
So let's go ahead and ask the questions now and get out in front of it. I feel like everybody knows where the burrs in the saddles are. It's just we don't get out in front of it.
Yeah.
So often we don't get out in front of the problems that plague us on every single project.
For sure. Now this is good. So next on the list, we keep going.
Okay, so this is a good one, and this is more so, I want to say, on us, but it is something that the GC can do reactively to help us on this. If you have an RFI, speaking of hot RFIs, and you send one out to us and you're like, man, I want to make sure that the engineer is looking at this today. And if you don't get a response for the good engineers out there, if you don't get an email response back from us, say like received, I understand the situation, I'm on it. Pick up the phone, call us, in an hour or two after sending that email. If you don't hear a peep from us, and if it's a really critical item, that's good to keep. There could be a lot of things going on, and we could have some people have huge inboxes, and we all treat our inbox differently at the office. But to pick up the phone and call is beneficial. Is really beneficial, just for us to go, oh, got it, totally get it. Let me move you to the top. Thank you for calling me and letting me know.
Oh my gosh. A millennial just said to pick up the phone and call him. And what do I say all the time? Yeah. Pick up the frickin' phone. That's another millennial saying it too. It's so important, isn't it? I think it's good to pick up the phone instead of sending another email to check in, right? I don't know how you feel about that, Rich, but I feel like if you're able to come to them and say, hey, I'm just checking in. That's it. I'm just letting you know this is a hot item. I'm sorry I said the word. I did it again.
Right.
I'm so
you
sorry.
Hit reply all, and then you add their boss,
and you blast
them with a question mark or a hello or something in all caps. That's how you get a better response, and you actually foster a relationship of trust.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah,
and build rapport. I think that's the proper way of
single question marks. I really build trust with people through single question marks.
I like single question marks followed by like exclamation.
Yeah, that's a good one.
It's emphasizing that I have a question.
Yeah, the hello is good.
Yes,
either that or the single, or just them saying your name back.
You
that's
could just
really
say,
good.
Hey, jerkface, are you there?
Then you put best at the bottom with your signature.
Yeah. Cheers.
No,
Cheers.
my favorite.
Cheers.
My favorite thing is when it's all caps hello, and then underneath in their signature it just says "do unto others like others would do."
Yeah.
It's just got the golden rule under there, and you're like, bruh.
Consider
respectfully.
Consider the environment before printing this email. It's like, yeah, because I've ever printed an email in my life.
You just polluted my ears. How about that? Consider that environment.
Oh yeah, gosh, that's awesome.
It's true. It's real. I want to throw one back at you, and that's, I've got this working premise that engineering offices actually train their people to say no often. And there's a reason that I believe this. And the reason is because you're engineers and you tie hours and dollars together, and you are like insanely aware of that metric. Like, how many hours did I spend on that project? Am I over hours? We ran out of hours. If I don't have any more hours, the money goes. Anyway, so if I say no, like, let's say I have a suggestion that may improve the project but opens a small can of worms, and it could save money or could make it go faster or whatever, but it is not per the CD. You say per a lot. You got to say per.
You have to say per.
Per the CDs. So no, build it per the CDs is kind of like, well, it's no. Like, no. So are you trained at the engineer's office in the art of no?
At the Institute of Engineers International.
Did they train you in the art of no?
That's the first. So if anyone out there, your engineering class 101 is the art of no. You guys should know that. That's the first class you take. How to say no in a thousand ways.
Respectfully yours.
Cheers.
Cheers. Yeah, cheers.
It could come, definitely a loaded question, because it can come from a lot of different parameters that influence that. Money is one of them for sure. One aspect of, there's 10 different ways to do everything when it comes to building a building. And so we're not going to put all 10 ways on construction documents. We're going to choose one and say, we believe that this is the best way. And then it can come to light during construction that, hey, in reality, we could have did it this way, or we want to do it this way because it does save money, or it's proven to do X, Y, Z. That just comes down to this extra layer as you pull this freaking onion apart. Unfortunately, some risk involved in just terms of like, hey, if you want to go outside of the stamped construction documents, by default, even if in the back of our head we're like, I think that's a pretty bulletproof idea. Like, it's still, we have to do our due diligence to say it's code compliant, it's structurally adequate, it's safe, it's meeting everything that we've already gone through the first time to ensure. We have to do that. And that takes time, that takes resources. And so then the question becomes, well, maybe we would love to do it. Are we getting paid for it? Do we have to ask that tough question? Hey, we think you're right, this could save money. But if that's the case, in that calculation of saving money, does that factor in the additional design time for us? And we're being compensated for that. If not, if we're building relationships, and we may just bite the bullet and say, yep, we're going to take this on. I think that's a great idea. There's so many pieces to that. No, I don't know. Just do a lot of those points kind of.
It is, but
So
it is a thing.
He's saying no to your question about no.
He said yes to my question. He said, yes, this is absolutely a thing.
Okay. All right. Fair.
I mean,
All right.
so true or false, engineers do think in the metric of hours and dollars.
For most projects, it is billable time, if that's how the contract's set up. So that's always considered.
And if I send an RFI that is going to be an obvious spend of your billable time, you're going to be more averse to volunteering your time for that, whether it's good for the project or not. And on top of that, that's very leading.
I was going to say, hang on now,
objection,
hang
Your
on
Honor.
now. Yeah.
Lightly. The question is leading.
Slightly.
I get it. So I'm leading you just, here, just put your neck in this little loop.
Good.
I hope they can see my face when as soon as you said that, I was like, oh, wait a second. Wait a second.
No, you're not going to do that to me. No, I mean, so I don't want to paint that in a light of you would not do what is in the best interest of the project, and you'd go to any lengths to shed any extra effort because you make more money and you're more,
I'm sure there
capitalist that just wants money.
Hey, I'm sure there are people
There
out there
are
that
some
do that
I think that there are some that are trained
to do that.
to operate that way because the business side of things for that engineering firm wins. It's a selfish mindset that you don't want to think of. Rich, I doubt you guys operate this way, but I have seen it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That no is actually a production no to make sure that I make as much money as possible.
That's the case for a lot of different entities, though, man. Like that. I mean, that's the case for contractors all over the place.
Okay, yeah, but I'm going to raise my hand and say that it is the producer of vast construction inefficiency.
Oh, yes, it is. I'm not saying it's
because
right.
we go, man, I really wish people would feed back to me. Man, I really wish somebody would talk and ask a bunch of questions. Man, I wish that we could really learn from one another and forge this feedback loop so that we could make each other better. All the while, when you do that thing, you're taking my time, and I need to shut that down as fast as possible because I will continue to make more money if I do so.
Well, we just need better compensation models if that's the case, or something to that effect. So, Rich,
that just word.
Yeah.
I got a couple of points here. Hopefully I remember them all. The first one is compensation. From the design of a building and its life cycle. I don't know if you've heard this before, but it's a really kind of popular, famous speech from a very famous structural engineer. And he said, hey, let's look at it this way. You're lucky to get 1.5% in structural fees for the design of a structure. And you are responsible as the engineer of record and your design team and all that for the lifespan of that structure. So you design it for 100 years. Okay, you're on the hook for 100 years if something happens to that thing. And you get 1.5% to do all your work and hold that liability for the life. Finish construction, and then realtor comes in, realtor flips it for, whatever commission, 1-2%. And every time that building is sold in its lifetime, 2%, 2%, 2%, 2%. And then he goes on to say, maybe we just got it wrong. Why am I in engineering? Maybe I should go be a realtor. But there's something vastly wrong with that picture as why are dollar values leveraged that way with someone who's selling a property where they have no risk involved versus an engineer or a contractor building the dang thing, and they're responsible for its well-being for its lifetime with a smaller fee. So we are already squeezed as is, in a lot of people's opinion in our industry, both sides, construction and in design. So we're already working with nothing as is. We have to be lean.
Well, okay, so free market will always squeeze cost.
Well, yeah, of course.
So that is going to be a reality of life in most anything we do. Like free market will squeeze cost because nobody wants to pay more for something than they have to.
Right.
The question is not, should we pay as little for the viable service we need as possible? Should we pay as little for the coverage of liability as possible? The question is, do we need to expand that fee in order to cover better the scope of design? That maybe the scope of design is actually needing to grow. Maybe the scope of design needs more time. Maybe you need 2% in order to get a better design together, but maybe that better design would render a better, less liable result.
Well, great. Kind of flipping that in here. All right. So, Rich, do you feel like if you had a little more time on a project, you would be able to eke out some of these other little details, refine some things down to where the cost savings would be exponential in comparison to the amount of money that is being spent on your services?
That's kind of the golden metric. That we don't know. How can you measure it? Because it's only after the fact you look back and say, man, I wish we had caught that or this or that in design and it would have saved
Right.
XYZ potentially. But how much additional coordination and design would that have actually taken? That RTU, we needed that on week 1. Were they really going to get us that RTU on week 1? Or that's a very small thing, but that's an unknown. That could be really powerful to understand that.
I like a shared savings model, like make it sweeten the pot for everybody. Yeah, you got extra design time. Well, then you should be paid for that and compensated for that. If it saves the owner money and I'm, switching something up, perhaps I should offer something to the owner. I like that response. Many times it's, sure, you can go ahead and do that. Let us know what the credit to the owner is going to be. And then, everybody's going to retain something for their time. But after the payment's out, then the owner gets a little savings and maybe a better product, or maybe it's an equal and you get a better thing for the same money.
Well,
But people need to be made whole.
Yeah, well, yeah, of course. And that was something that, didn't Lee Evie talk about that too when we had him on the show? He talked about that, is that they had kind of like a bonus system sort of set
Yes.
up for the Pentagon project. So the Pentagon renovation project is he was in charge of all that from the owner's perspective. Billions of dollars, crazy thing. But that was one of the things that they did. It was if you save us money, then we will cut you a check, and it's based off of performance. And they have each one of these little tiers that are out there and gettable for everybody too. So it just motivates them to save money and not cut costs in a bad way, but just be efficient and do things really well.
It triggers imagination.
I think that's a big chunk of it too.
would
Triggering imagination.
we rather have an industry of deadheads that are just listening and following directions, or would we rather trigger the imagination of all of the great builders in our industry?
Oh yeah, that one obviously.
That obviously, but is that what our current system does?
Well, you talked about free market, and a place where that gets squandered is for those big custom jobs, Pentagon, super ultra big jobs. That's a completely custom one-off. And so that contract goes through so much additional effort to really dial in on what we want to do. And it's custom. And then you can build in those incentives, and it's great. And usually there's I don't know, but usually there's a design team already locked in, and everyone's locked in to be, hey, we're going to do this work. Let's figure out how we're going to do it and how the dollars are going to get distributed. But for a lot of typical jobs, sure, you could have a really excited GC, if you do a design build and GC's on board and design team's on board or whatever. And you're like, yeah, we want to be out of the box. We want to do fees and we want to have an incentive system. And you tell that to the owner, and then the owner just says, well, there's this other design team down the road that says they'll do it for 50,000 lump sum. So I'm just going to do that. I just want a building. I don't, I want to sell my t-shirts.
I don't want to innovate. I just want a freaking building.
I just want a building.
Well, no. They want to know the risk. They want to know the monetary risk associated with the design part of construction, right? So that developer has risk too. That developer has the liability of buying design and never building the building, buying the real estate and not having the thing pencil, buying it and having the economy go nuts. I mean, I'm sure there was a developer out there that probably lost his shirt when COVID hit because of something.
Right.
So they've got their risk too. They're trying to put that into a silo so that they know how much of it they have. And if a designer says, I'm going to work until I get the project done at this hourly rate, and I think you're going to come out with a better design and probably come out even cheaper or equal, or I define it at 50K, this is how the market works. I mean, like most of your projects are probably lump sum projects. You've offered a lump sum fee for doing the consulting engineering, and then that metric we're talking about, that time and the money associated with it, that's your success metric on the lump sum price. That's not how you're getting paid. That's your success metric that you're tracking internally. And I would wager that projects, if they work anything like they do at ABSI, you got one that wins big and another that loses big, but it all kind of equals out. Which means there's one owner paying a rate, and that project was successful.
Yeah.
And another owner paying, and that project was dismal. But they're paying that middle metric that makes all of them feasible for me to do business, even though I spent a lot more time on that crappy project and a lot less time on the good one.
It's figuring out those unknowns with the building industry, let alone working on an existing structure versus a new structure. A new structure, there's still so much unknown, and that's a big point to weigh when calculating fees of like, do we include some of that in our fee to absorb some of that unknown so that, we can account for it. But then there may be, like you're saying, a project where it's included because you need to take on that risk of the unknown. And turns out there were no unknowns, and it went really smoothly and it went great, and okay, it's good to go. And so some people might say, well, then you charged more for that building, that owner paid more and it went great. But the flip is true, where you could have a fee where you have an amount set aside for unknowns, and then there's 10 times more unknowns that you didn't think were possible. But you can't go to the owner and say, hey, I know we talked about $50,000 for this building. Turns out it's $100,000 and the design's done, so pay me. It's like, no, maybe there's some justification here and there for some ad serves or whatever, but it's like, no, tough cookies. This is what you said, and you're the expert.
Well, that was what the owner wanted. That was what the owner wanted, is they wanted to know the extent of the risk.
Right.
50K is what I get unless I do something that causes it to balloon. I add something, or there's a viable unknown or whatever, but I'm going to contain it.
That's
here.
on my head as the owner.
And I'm willing to say that if 50 is better than the other market prices I get,
right,
you're competent and you do your job and get it done and make 30K, that's fine. But I mean, on the flip side, you're not going to overrun either. And so, yeah, I mean, it's a very interesting conversation. Basis of your fees, I mean, it's square foot metric. Like a lot of times it's square foot and building type.
There's different ways to go about it. Those are two metrics that we use to compare the different fee generations that we come up with to say, all right, are we within ballpark here of all one another?
What's fun is when you bring the PETA factor in and you go, oh, I've dealt with that guy before. Square foot price just went up.
PETA?
Yeah.
Pain in the...
Uh-huh.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. Pain in... Yeah. All right. Sweet. All right. Good to know.
Yeah.
It's true. That's true.
We're not talking about pita bread.
Not talking about pita bread.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, all right, Rich, dude, we've covered a lot here.
I feel like we've run completely off of the engineer rails, but
it's a little bit off. It's good though, and that's okay because it's stirring good conversation. Because I think the fee structure is something that's been a big pain for a lot of people, and it's, I don't know, it's a dynamic conversation. There's a lot
Money
that needs to
causes
change.
motivation. Like money is
yeah.
a motivator for how we act.
Listen, I'm not looking to spool back up. I need you to just shut up and sit there a second
have
while I ask him
more
our
to-
megaphone question. All right? Okay, shut up.
It's so good though.
No, stop. We'll do a 5-minute Friday on it. All right?
40-minute, 5-minute.
40-minute, 5-minute. Rich, dude. All right. So all of that say, do you have any words of wisdom? We'll say, let's give you a megaphone. All right. So we like to give our guests a megaphone at the end of every episode to speak to the whole construction industry, right? So we gave you a megaphone in around 60 seconds to say something. What would you want to say, man? What would you want the industry to know and try to take with them down the road, and so we can get better?
For the industry as a whole, I don't know if I have one particularly offhand at the moment. Can it be engineering specific?
Hey, man, bring it. Come on, what you got?
So talking to all the engineers out there specifically, I'd say, you know what? No, this does branch out to everybody, but I'll give it in the metaphor of engineering. Don't be afraid to branch out in other aspects of areas that you're weak in. You know, don't shy away from areas that you're less capable in. You should be attacking those to create a more rounded design professional that you are, or construction professional that you are. You know, I strive to try to be, weirdly enough, the jack of all trades rather than just a master of one, because that, in my mind, makes me more approachable to say, we're working on this new job or that new job or this custom job. And, oh, I've done stuff like that before. Let me get involved, instead of just being in this narrow path of concrete building, you know, and closing myself in from all these cool opportunities. So don't pigeonhole yourself because you're scared or you're less capable at something. Just dive into it and be excited to learn about it.
Discomfort equals growth.
Yes.
I think that, yeah, boiling it off, that's really good, man. I like that a lot. Well, Rich, dude, thanks for joining us this week.
No problem. Thank you for having me.